Hello, everyone. My name is Brian, and I will be your MC today for the webinar on Capstone Connect and Wakelet, using those together along with co-host Andy Clemens. We'll get started here in just about a minute. Would love to know, before we get going, where you're all joining us from, and if you are currently using any of the Capstone digital products. So things like PebbleGo, Capstone Interactive, or if you are a current Capstone Connect subscriber. And I will be back with you here in just about a minute to get started. Looking forward to a great presentation today. Well, it is 4:30, so don't want to keep us waiting any minute longer. Again, my name is Brian Schmidt, and I will be starting us off during this presentation today. I'm very excited to get to share with you. Really, it's a new platform that we've not seen paired with Capstone Connect in any previous webinars, so that's really exciting. I know a number of you are probably familiar with Wakelet. But that's going to be one of the big focuses of today. We will take a look at how Wakelet and Capstone Connect paired together can create some really amazing learning experiences. So without further ado, let's jump over and do some official introductions. So again, my name is Brian. I'm the EdTech Marketing Manager at Capstone, and get the privilege of connecting with customers throughout the country and talking about our digital products. So things like PebbleGo, which supports specifically the K through 3 teachers and librarians, and over the last year, especially parents and students, doing digital research, awesome project-based learning, and then also Capstone Interactive eBooks. So our entire library of over 5,000 different titles in our platform. And then there's the newest thing, which we're here to talk about today, which is Capstone Connect. And that really is a hub that brings all of it together through unified search, all aligned to standards. So that's my role. And Andy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Andy Clemens. I am the School Library Media Specialist at David C. Barrow Elementary in Athens, Georgia. So I work with students in pre-K through 5th grade. I have been in education for 20 years. I started as a elementary teacher in a 3rd grade classroom for 7 years before I moved into the library for the past 13 years. So I love working with all of the students and teachers and families in my school, but I also love sharing my work through Twitter and my blog and speaking in lots of different places. And I did want to add in that, this has been a challenging year or a year and a half for a lot of us, all of us. And I wanted to let you know that just where we are with school, we have been virtual for a long time. We were virtual since March of 2020. We have had a little bit of in-person learning this year. We had 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and then we had a couple of weeks after Thanksgiving, and then we had to switch back to virtual, and then we stayed virtual until almost the beginning of March, and we went back face-to-face 4 days a week, and now we're back face-to-face 5 days a week with some of our students learning virtually. So, it's been a year where we've had to be flexible in our planning and know that at any moment we could be switching back and forth between in-person and virtual learning. So that's where I am right now.
Sounds like it has been an adventure some year, to say the least. So one of the things I always like to do to start off our webinars is just go through some of the basic housekeeping, some of the most common questions we get to start off, and make sure those are answered for you. So we definitely want to make this two-way conversation. So feel free, there's a couple different ways you can connect with us about asking questions. So you can ask us questions right within the chat. And we have a couple people that are actually be able to respond to those as we're presenting. There's also a Q&A function that I'm sure you're all familiar with now after a year of Zoom. But that's another place too. Feel free to ask questions in there, and we will get to those. Definitely we'll get to those at the end. I'm also going to be trying to monitor throughout as well and bring other questions up as I can. So additionally, I want to let you know you don't need to take copious notes. We are recording this, and we'll be sharing the link out to the recording tomorrow morning. So look forward to that. Along with that, we'll also send out a copy of the slide deck as well, just if you want to reference any of the information that I'll be going over. And then the other thing, many of you probably noticed this on Twitter and Facebook and even Instagram, Pinterest, you name it. Capstone has a really vibrant community. To be fair, so does Wakelet. Andy has a really awesome social presence as well. He shares his projects he does with his students. I would just encourage any of you who haven't, get out on Twitter, get out on Facebook, any of the platforms that you're comfortable with, and search. There's a lot of good resources out there, and we definitely share a lot of those on a regular basis. So some of the ways you can stay involved in conversation or search for things, using a tool like TweetDeck, which is one I love to use. You can search for any of these terms or participate in the conversation as well. So feel free to do that during the webinar, but continue it after as well. So brief overview of the agenda for today. Obviously, we've gone through introductions. I'll be talking briefly about what is Capstone Connect. I know a number of you probably are somewhat familiar at least, but it's always good to just discuss and take a look at what that ultimately is designed to do. And then we really jump to the meat of today's webinar, which is to have Andy walk us through some really incredible project examples he's done using Wakelet. And then towards the end, he will be going through a number of different examples that really get to how to take the technology and not have that be the only part of a project, but use it in a way to kick off another aspect, which is getting out and doing things in makerspace or just outside away from technology. So I'm really excited about both those. And then, like I said, we'll have time at the end for questions as well. So without any further ado, we will jump over into looking at what is Capstone Connect. So I think I may have skipped a slide. Of course I did. So Capstone Connect, for any of you who don't yet know, it is really designed to be a large online source of K-5 ebook bundles, the nonfiction articles. So that's where PebbleGo, PebbleGo Next, our different add-ons come in for PebbleGo. And then the other piece of that too is we brought together the instructional support. So things like lesson plans, activities, really meant to help provide resources for educators, and put it all together in this one-stop hub where you can search for and easily share any of this content with your students. So the goal was to make life just a little easier using the content that you love and trust and your students love, and put it there with one link that you can put into any platform. And obviously one of the big motivators for us to make sure we were doing this as quickly as possible was we wanted to respond last year to some of the early struggles and challenges that educators and honestly parents were having with all the resources. Is how do I get this to my kids as easily as possible in a way that they can use it, regardless of what the tool my school uses or what I use. So yeah, that is really the heart of Capstone Connect. We're going to watch a quick video, and then I will just kind of take us on a journey of what exactly some of the different ways you can plug Capstone Connect into various LMSs or EdTech tools. So I'll be back with you in just a second.
You're a teacher. You spend hours every week finding resources for your students. The right resources. You gather it, you send it, they click it, and get an error. Or have to create yet another login and password. They get frustrated. Their caregivers get frustrated. And you get frustrated. There is an easier way. Introducing Capstone Connect, your one-stop content hub, where you can quickly and easily search and share educationally appropriate, highly engaging Capstone content. Capstone Connect gives you instant access to PebbleGo, PebbleGo Next, PebbleGo Spanish, PebbleGo Read More, Capstone Interactive's collection of eBooks with read-aloud audio, and hundreds of other digital learning resources designed for use by both teachers and students. With Capstone Connect, you have thousands of content pieces that are matched to state and national standards right at your fingertips. No matter what ed tech tool you're using, you can give your students direct access to Capstone Connect's content with just a few clicks. Here's how it works. Once you've signed into your PebbleGo account, simply click the Capstone drop-down menu and select Search. Here you can search by either state and national standards or by title and get instant results, which you can organize by type and also preview each item to find the exact content you're looking for. Then just copy the link and directly add it to any EdTech platform to give your students one-click access. No new logins or passwords required. Connecting your students to great resources has never been easier. With Capstone Connect. Go to capstoneconnect.com and click Request More Information to be contacted by your local Capstone representative.
So, as you noticed, really it is designed to make this a super simple process to find standardized content. So you can know that you're teaching the things you need to be teaching, and your students have easy access to that content. So one of the ways I like to think about this is, depending on what role you might have in a school or district, you're looking at either learning management system, so things like Canvas or Schoology. Clever's another big one. These are four of the common ones we hear from our educator partners that they're using in schools and districts throughout the country. So love to hear from you which learning management systems you guys are currently using. So feel free to chat those in. The reason I bring these four up is these are four for sure that Capstone Connect works with. Additionally, any others you can think of, it works as well. The nice part is it's super simple to get those links and put them right into places where your students would access them. So the other piece of this, and this is what we are hearing and keep hearing over the last year plus, is how important various ed tech tools have been to help provide a platform for especially the younger kids, the ability to access all the different resources. I know when I was visiting my family in Nevada, my nephew was using Seesaw and Google Classroom. We'll take a look at Wakelet today. Flipgrid and Buncee, two others we know are very common, but would love to hear from you too. If there's other ed tech tools. One of the things we've done is put together some videos for some of the most common learning management systems and ed tech tools and how Capstone Connect plugs into those. But that really is the heart of what Capstone Connect was developed to do, is to say, whatever tool you're using, and these are just examples of some of the most common, with Capstone Connect and the content that it provides, you're able to plug those in and build really robust lessons, really robust learning experiences, even in a remote setting. The nice part is they work great in a classroom where you're all in class. So If that's where you've been for most of the year, that's awesome. Or if that's the plan is to get back to that, know that this tool is designed to help you with that as well. And again, it just helps to provide more and more opportunities for your students, whatever setting they're in, to be able to access the content in a real simple way. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Andy, and he will take us through some of the projects that he has done using Capstone Connect and Wakelet.
All right, great, thank you. So as I mentioned before, we've had a real mix of being virtual and in person this year. And at this current state, most of our school is in person, but we still have one class at each grade level that's virtual. So when I'm collaborating with teachers to create projects to implement with their classes, I really have to think in both modes. And so I usually, right now, plan a lesson or a project to be taught virtually first, and then I can modify that to use with our in-person students. I want it to be as easy as possible to share with kids over Zoom, and then have some interactive components with it. And then I can weave in some non-technology things for our in-person students. So for me, I have really enjoyed using Wakelet this year. And if you're not familiar with Wakelet, Wakelet is basically a tool where you can create a collection of many different things. It's a way to curate, and you can create this list of websites, videos, pictures, any kind of tool that you want to use in a project. You can create it so that it's sequential from top to bottom, or if order doesn't really matter, you can kind of set it up so that it's more like a choice board type situation. And so this year, when I would work on a project, I would start with our standards. I would many times go to Capstone Connect first and see what was available there and kind of build the lesson from there. But as all of you do, you find resources in many different places. You might have a YouTube video that you need to pull in, or you might want to use Flipgrid, or you might want to make a Padlet, or you might have a Google Doc that you need to link to. And so what I like about Wakelet is that you can put all of that in one place. Then you have one link that you can share with students, either with a QR code or the link. You can put it in Google Classroom, or whatever way that you share your resources with students. At our school, we have Clever for signing into things, but then we use all of the Google tools. Google Classroom is the main way that teachers share information with students. So what I want to do today is show you just a few projects that we worked on this year and some things that are coming up. And then I'll give you a little refresher of some of the things you saw in the video with how I found the resources that went into these various projects. So the first Wakelet that I want to show you is a project that we did with fifth grade. And like many great projects, it started with just a seed of an idea where our fifth grade was studying the Great Depression and the New Deal. And one of the fifth grade teachers said, I really feel like there's a lot of connections between what happened during that era, during the Great Depression and the New Deal era, with what's happening today in the world. And so she really wanted to do a project around that, but she wasn't sure what to do. And so this was kind of an example where, sometimes you go into Capstone and you find the one thing that you need, and that's all. And then other times you find tons of resources where kids are going to get information from lots of places. So for this particular project, we were able to base everything around one ebook from the Capstone Interactive Library, and it was Migrant Mother. So in this Wakelet, I was able to put a link to the photograph at the Library of Congress of Migrant Mother. And then I wasn't sure if I was going to teach this lesson live, or if teachers were just going to use it as a lesson that kids could do asynchronously. And so I created it so that it could be asynchronous, but then I ended up doing it live. So you'll see I put in a video of me teaching the beginning of the lesson. And then there's a link to the full text of the book that will read to students, or they can read it themselves. And for the lesson, I only read a portion of the book and then encouraged them to go back and read the rest on their own. But what they ended up doing in this project was thinking about how a photograph could capture a moment in time and tell us something about the history of that time. And they also thought about what a photograph can't tell us. What other information do we need about that picture? So after that, I gave them links to several resources of photographs from the Great Depression. And then I also gave them some websites for things happening today. So they compared things like soup kitchens in the Great Depression with some of the long lines of cars that we have seen at food banks today with people who are unemployed and needing to get food. We looked at some of the medical situations that were in the Great Depression and then compared that with the COVID vaccinations that people are getting. And so kids, kind of came up with side-by-side images of something that happened in the Great Depression, something that was happening today, and talked about how those two pieces were paralleled with each other. The great thing that I could do after this, after they worked on their project, I was able to add in some other eBooks that were in the Capstone Interactive Library and put links to those about school in the Great Depression, and then FDR and how he confronted the Great Depression and World War II. Then when the kids finished their projects, I was able to make a Wakelet that was of just their work so that I could share out the work that they had created. So that was one example of a Wakelet that used a few resources from Capstone and some resources from some other places. So I want to show you now another one similar to that. Our third grade works on Colonial America. And one of the things I like to do in the notes section of a Wakelet, and as I'm scrolling through, you'll notice there's a picture, there's a background over here, and those are things that you can do in Wakelet. You can customize how it looks. You can upload pictures, or you can use pictures from their library. So at the top of the Wakelet, I usually like to put the standard that students are working on. And then for this one, we used a few things. There were a few videos that we pulled in to see what life was like in colonial times. And then I noticed that there was an article in PebbleGo Next about the American colonies. And so I had kids break up into groups and read about different parts of the colonies. One focused on New England, one focused on the southern colonies, and one focused on the middle colonies. And then they used Padlet to talk about what they had learned about what life was like in that time. So we kind of did like a jigsaw where kids could read about just one section, but then they could learn from everyone else by seeing what people posted on the Padlet. And again, in this Padlet, or in this Wakelet, I gave some links to other books that were about colonial America. So that is kind of similar structure to what you saw in the first Wakelet. This is the one I want to spend a little more time with because it's what we've been working on right now, and it's very timely because Earth Day is coming up tomorrow on April 22nd. So our third grade studies how humans impact the environment. That's one of their standards. But it's also a great thing to learn about around Earth Day for really any grade level. We also are in April, which is Poetry Month. And so I decided to pull a lot of things together onto this Wakelet to want to look at how humans impact the environment, but also to look at how we can reuse things to create poetry for the month of April and Poetry Month. We have a celebration called Poem in Your Pocket Day, which we do next week, where every kid in the school will have a chance to read an original poem into a microphone in the library. And so we're going to be doing that in person and virtually. So the way that I did this one is we actually started with a read aloud. We read a book called The Mess That We Made, and that is not something that's in Capstone Connect. That was a book from our library, so I read that aloud. And then we looked at a kind of poetry called Blackout Poetry. And Blackout Poetry was made famous by Austin Kleon, who is a person in Texas, and he makes blackout poetry out of newspapers. So I put a video of Austin. I'm not going to make you watch the whole video, but he goes through and shows his process for creating his blackout poems. And he uses a newspaper. And so we saw that he, takes a section of text and he boxes it up, and then he goes through and he chooses words to be a part of his poem, and then all of the other words get blacked out. That's why it's called blackout poetry. So what we did with this is I taught to kids about how a lot of times in the library we have books that have been well loved, well read, and they have been repaired as much as they possibly can be. And then eventually they just can't live in the library anymore. And so I talked about the options I have for those kinds of print books. And one of the things that I do is I take pages out of books and I save them in a box so that we can use them for blackout poetry. So for our in-person students, that was an option that they had as a way that they could help the environment by reusing a page from a book to turn into a poem. And I specifically tried to find some pages that were more environmental kinds of things, like books about animals and the ocean and atlases and things like that. But there was also an online blackout poetry maker. And so I put a link to that on the Wakelet as well. And it gives a text for kids to practice with, or anyone to practice with. It's out of Alice in Wonderland. There's also Pride and Prejudice and Heart of Darkness. And so I went through and showed them how I often, when I'm creating a blackout poem, start with a noun and then try to find words that go with that noun. So rabbit hole, like a tunnel, dipped suddenly down, very deep well. And so you kind of get the idea where you choose these words, and then at the bottom, you just click the word blackout, and it actually creates your blackout poem for you. So here's where Capstone Connect came in. So back on our Wakelet, what I decided to do was have kids read. There are lots of articles in PebbleGo that are about humans and the environment. So there's humans and atmosphere and biosphere and hydrosphere and wet erosion and weathering and deforestation. So I had kids go into one of these PebbleGo articles and read it, and then they took a section of text and they copied it, and then they went into the poetry generator, and over here to the left there's a box for custom text. So they pasted that part of PebbleGo into the custom text and clicked enter, and now they're able to create a blackout poem using the text that they read in PebbleGo. Then back in our Wakelet, there was a space for kids to share their poetry. So I made a Padlet and linked it there so that whether they made a digital blackout poem or a blackout poem with one of our pages from a book, they were able to share that here on the Padlet. And so we have poems from all 4 of our 3rd grade classes, all kind of in one spot. Once they finished that, I was able to find several books in the Capstone Interactive Library that I linked down here as well. Now, one thing I did want to point out about Wakelet is that oftentimes when you put a link into Wakelet, it just pulls kind of the main image. So you'll see like on this one, it just says Capstone Interactive. If you want the actual cover of the book, you can, from the Capstone different tools, you can take the cover of the book and upload it here. I usually don't, just for speed, but it is more visually appealing if you have time to put those images in for kids. At the very end of this lesson, after kids had had a chance to read some of the books, there was an exit ticket where they could share some of the things they learned about how humans can help the environment. And they also had a chance to give some feedback about the lesson. Now, this was a lesson that took much longer than one session. So the great thing about having it all on a Wakelet is that we can do part of it together. They can continue part of it on their own, or the teacher could continue using that in class as well. All right. So I want to move forward with one final thing that I've been thinking about, and that is summer. Oftentimes this time of year, we start thinking about what kids might do over the summer, whether it's summer school, summer reading, summer camps, right? And I'm not a big reading list kind of person. I don't usually create lists of books that are required reading, but I do often offer some suggestions for people to think about. But I know our kids have spent a lot of time on screens this year, and I'm a huge technology advocate. I love technology. It's amazing. It's allowed us to continue our learning during COVID, but our kids do need a break from their screens. So what I decided to do for summer was create a Wakelet that is filled with different kinds of books about making. So I went into Capstone Connect and I searched for lots of different texts that were about making. And I sorted them kind of by what they are. So there's a section that are 10-minute projects that kids could go into one of these and read and create something. So hopefully the idea is that they would spend some time reading in Capstone Interactive Library, and then they would spend some time away from their screen actually getting their hands on something or going outside or doing some kind of experiment. So there's 10-minute projects, there's a list of experiments, there's how-to books, there's a book about cardboard, making things out of cardboard, and I added in the Global Cardboard Challenge website that kids could look at. And then at the bottom, I created a couple of ways that they could share what they've been making. There's a Padlet if they just want to take a picture of something, but there's also a flip grid if they want to be a little more involved and show kind of the steps they went through and talk a little more about their project. So I hope that that will offer families something to read over the summer, but also some encouragement to try something that's off of their screen as well. And that's kind of how I try to do my lessons in the library as well. I try to think about, like with the Blackout Poetry, I tried to offer a chance to use the computer, but also a chance to get their hands on some markers, paper, and scissors and create instead of just sitting in front of their screen. But kids did have the choice, like with the Blackout Poetry. Some chose to do the digital Blackout poem, even though they were in person and had access to the paper, and that was okay. That was their choice, but I did give them that choice to make on their own. So before I jump over to questions, I want to show you again how Capstone Connect works. So this is how I found those resources. So for us, we have a start page where all of our stuff is, and you'll see Clever is here to log in. But when you go into PebbleGo, you'll see your PebbleGo and you'll see your PebbleGo Next. But up here in the right corner is your little drop down where you can get to your library. But the standard search is where you want to go. And so for me, I like to use the state standards search. There is the option to do a title search. So I'm going to show you that first, actually. So in the title search, you really have to be searching things that are actually in the titles of the articles or the books. And so that doesn't always give you what you need, but it can be helpful especially if you're not looking at a particular standard. So for example, with my Blackout Poetry, I might have typed things like pollution and then search. And then you'll see that there's a PebbleGo Next article and there's a PebbleGo article that have the word pollution in them. So title search is a way that you can do that. But for me, and I think a way a lot of us plan, is probably going to the standards that we're teaching. So what I did was went to Georgia and science and 3rd grade. And then you'll see that there's our main standard at the top with all the little substandards below. I'm going to scroll down to our life science. And instead of clicking on the very, very specific substandards, I usually click on the overall one so that I can get more resources to look at. Once you click and it populates, you'll see that there's multiple pages for this one. So this is an instance where the filter might be helpful at the top. So you can see I could just look at the PebbleGo Next articles. I could just look at the instructional materials. And for eBooks, you can even filter it by level. You could do any of these levels that pertain to you. For us, we use guided reading level the most. And you can make a range and then filter by that range. The other thing that you'll notice as you scroll through is that it gives you a picture of the book, the title, and it also gives you that information about reading level right here. So even if you didn't use the filter, you would still be able to see those pieces. Now, when I'm getting ready to put something on a Wakelet, all you have to do is come over here to the right, click that copy link, and you're ready to put it on to your Wakelet. All right, I am going to pause and see if we have any questions and check in.
There is one question. Do you have any blank templates of any of the Wakelets that you could share?
So there's not really a blank template. Other than, I mean, I can share, I actually did a blog post this week about the Blackout Poetry lesson that I did. So I'll put my blog back up in just a minute. But if you go to that post, you actually can see that Wakelet and see how that one works, if that would be helpful to you. But when you're in Wakelet, let me go back to my screen share. When you're in Wakelet, all you do is click that create collection, and it kind of has a template for you in a way. It's got, you know, your spot to put your cover image. This description is where I put the standard, and then it's just a matter of clicking those plus signs, and out to the side it gives you all the options. You can put the website in right here, the link, but then you also can do text, you can put an image, bookmarks, you can upload a PDF, and there's even other things that you can click on over here. So it really kind of has a template for you ready to go as you build. The other thing to point out is that it will automatically be private when you're creating the Wakelet. I usually switch mine to unlisted because it's direct links into our subscription to PebbleGo and PebbleGo Next to Capstone Interactive Library. So I usually don't make those things public, except if I'm sharing something on the blog, which I don't share a ton of links like that on the blog, but I knew that this webinar was coming up and people would probably want to see an example. All right, were there any other questions?
No, I think that was the only real question. This has been fantastic.
All right. One of the things that I did not share that you can do, so Wakelet is a great way to, curate things together when you have multiple kinds of links. If you see that you only are wanting to pull together a list of ebooks, there is one other thing that you can do, and it's called a book list. So in Capstone Interactive Library, I'll show you some examples of what that looks like. I'm going to click on our library, and then up at the top, there's a button called Book List. So you'll see I've made a book list about Civil War, Reconstruction, turn of the century, and you can turn these on or off depending on when you're teaching these units. So if you want them to always be available, you can always have them on. But I usually turn them off once we've finished with a particular project, just so that it's not so cluttered. But again, I put the standard that students are working on at the top, and then I just populate all of those links. And you do that under the administrative section of Capstone Interactive Library. So once you've logged in with your admin login and password, you can easily create a book list. So that would be a difference where I wouldn't use Wakelet if I was just wanting to make a list of ebooks.
There was another question that just came in too.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you use Wakelet with your younger learners, so grades K through 2.
Yes, I do. And the great thing about Wakelet is, so our younger learners, pre-K, K, and 1, all use iPads, and the rest of our school uses Chromebooks. So for the iPads, it's really easy on your Wakelet. There's a QR code already there. So when you click the share button, there are lots of ways you can share it, and a QR code is one. So I just pull up that QR code and have them all hold their iPad up and get right to what they need to do.
Awesome. I think that is all the questions.
Right. Well, I'll share my contact information one more time. And again, the blog is here if you want to see a little more about that Blackout Poetry and pollution lesson and see what that Wakelet looked like.
Fantastic. Again, if there are any additional questions, feel free to connect with us on social media. Easiest place, fortunately or fortunately, I check it 24 hours a day and try to respond pretty quick. Additionally, if you know who your Capstone representative is, feel free to get in touch with them for more information on Capstone Connect, including price, if you're looking for custom quote, all those pieces. The reason I say that is simply because every school is going to have a slightly different circumstance based on if they have a district subscription to PebbleGo already, or might have a number of Capstone Interactive ebook titles. There's just some different factors there that we want to make sure to properly give you an accurate quote on that. But additionally, would love any other feedback you have. And again, very much appreciate you, Andy. This has been one of the most fantastic webinars in terms of being able to get to see how relatively simple these projects are, but at the same time, being able to see how incredible they can be for students as well. Especially love the Blackout Poetry example, using the difference between virtual and in-class ways to make that happen. So that was really, really awesome. And just to make sure, just make sure there are no other questions. But again, if there are others that come up, let us know. Again, this will be emailed to you as a recording tomorrow, along with a certificate of completion. So you'll get a way to show that you were at this if you have any professional development that this can be applied towards. And then also be sharing out just information and additional pieces for you to be able to connect with your rep. So Great to have you all here. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And we look forward to our next webinar coming up probably at some point during June. So stay tuned for more on that. And thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.